You're live.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Parks, Arts, Transparency, and Education Subcommittee agenda is called to order. Will staff note that Councilman Valenzuela is on the phone and everyone is present. Do we have any public comments? Nope. Okay. Items 3, 4, and 5 are for information only, but there's staff here to ask questions. Is here to ask questions if any of the colleagues have any. Does anybody have any questions on 3, 4, and 5? These. Oh, I forgot the minutes. I haven't been
Move to
doing.
approve.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes. Anybody 3, 4, and 5? No questions?
No.
Okay, we can move to the next part of the agenda. Item 6 is for consent action. There's no presentations planned, but staff is available for questions. Do I have a motion to approve item 6?
Motion to approve, item 6.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Items 7 through 9 are for information, discussion, and possible action. Does anybody on the committee have any questions as we move forward to item 7? No?
No.
Item 7, Read On Phoenix and Experience Corp expansion plan. Thank you. Tim, good to see you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Today I'm going to give an update on the Experience Corps expansion as well as soliciting for additional grant funds. We had an amazing year this year with great results that increased literacy fluency rates among first through third graders. But first, I'd like to give you a brief history of the program. In response to the state's third grade reading retention law, Move On When Reading, the Youth and Education Office created a Read On Phoenix initiative to collectively target literacy resources to the highest needed communities to ensure every child is reading at grade level by the end of third grade. The vision of Read On Phoenix is to collectively target literacy resources in 4 key areas. So that's school readiness, summer learning loss, after school literacy enrichment, and volunteerism. But there were several city programs that under each pillar of Read On Phoenix. Under school readiness, we have Head Start and Early Head Start, many of the library programs. We have our after school literacy programs, and then summer learning with the library and parks. But one thing that we did not do a good job in was our volunteer pillar. So under the volunteer pillar lacks city programs that assisted students in reading at grade level. And so this picture is an example of the Experience Corps program of how we're getting out into our communities, targeting first through third graders who are not reading at grade level. We pair them up with an AARP member or those individuals 50 and older, and we train them. Last year, the subcommittee approved to apply and accept funding from the Virginia Piper Charitable Trust to implement and pilot the program for the inaugural year. AARP is a nationally recognized volunteer tutoring program. Today, across the country, more than 2,000 Experience Corps members in 22 cities tutor and mentor elementary school age students struggling learning to read. The AARP Experience Corps program has the following overarching goals. With the city's program, the first thing we do is we recruit, train, and place volunteers in our most needed schools. Currently, last school year, our first year, we were at 10 schools. Our goal is to increase student literacy and education self-confidence. And most importantly, we increase family participation in student education experience. Here's another great picture of a tutor tutoring one of our students. For the 2014-15 school year, the program engaged 92 volunteer tutors to improve K-3 literacy. Those 92 volunteers served 300 students across the city, and our volunteers conducted approximately 10,000 volunteer hours. Students were selected based on their reading levels, and they received tutoring at a minimum of 2 sessions for 30 minutes per week with a specific curricula that is designed for fluency. That curriculum that we use is Reading A to Z, and a majority of our school districts in Phoenix use that curriculum. For the 2014-15 school year, we had amazing results, but most importantly, last year, these were our program partners. We were in 10 schools and 5 school districts that included Phoenix L, Fowler, Tolleson, Riverside, and Wilson Elementary School Districts. The program also partnered with Experience Matters, a nonprofit organization, to leverage resources with AmeriCorps, Senior Corps, Encore Fellow programs to assist in recruiting the 92 volunteers. Program performance, like I said, we had an amazing year. The primary indicator of success for this program includes student increases in literacy fluency rates measured by school standardized tests. Those tests could be DIBELS, Ames Web, BAS. Several school districts use different assessments. The program had promising results for the first year of implementation. Over 98% of our students had educational gains, and there were no third graders held back in the program based on the Move On when Reading retention law. In your package, you do have a graph of 7 school districts with fall, winter, and spring benchmarks. As you can see, the average words read per minute is the way we rate our literacy. You see increases among all schools. I did say we were in 10 schools. 2 schools use a different assessment called BAS, Benchmark Assessment System. They saw an 18% increase in comprehension. However, they do not assess for words read per minute, so we cannot crosswalk along all of our participating schools. Riverside, however, Riverside Elementary has not provided the spring assessment data, so we're still requesting that data for our students. But I want you to look closely at Sun Canyon. It's about in the middle of the graph. They saw the largest gain. So on average, the students that we received in the beginning of the year was 36 words read per minute. By the end of the program year, they were reading on average of 92 words per minute. And so the reason why you see that largest growth is the importance of choosing the right student. We target what we consider tier 2 students. There are bubble students, those that are just below grade level, to assist with reading fluency. One of our events on our program last year was a participation of Read Across America. So the entire year, all of our students, plus the students in those schools, received a book once a month. And we distributed over 6,000 books that last program year. These are some of the events. We did have some council members also out in the community reading during Read Across America, and they were reading books that we gave to our students. But most importantly, why we're here today is that due to the success of our program, many school districts want us to go into their schools. And so we are seeking approval to expand into the following school districts, those school districts are listed: Washington, Pendergast, Creighton, Laveen, Roosevelt, and Isaac school districts. We will pilot the program in one school district or one school in each district, which will bring our total schools participating to 16 and 11 school districts. We are also seeking approval to go after additional funding for future expansion. Because the demand of the program is increasing within our school districts. We have 25 elementary school districts, and I foresee that every school district will want a program like this in their school. A request for application through the AARP Foundation in collaboration with the Corporation for National and Community Service Social Innovation Funds have an application right now out for a 4-year term of up to $200,000 per year to expand the program. Currently, AARP Foundation is seeking letters of intent for this initiative. Again, like I said, with $200,000 per year for up to 4 years, and that will help us to expand the program in additional school districts. Currently, the city receives approximately $150,000 a year for 3 years from Piper Charitable Trust. That concludes the end of my presentation. Do you guys have any questions?
Councilman?
Just have a comment. Tim, that's great work. I mean, working with our other departments is crucial, working with the libraries, the Parks and Rec, our rec centers, and using all the resources of the city of Phoenix and partnering up with some foundations and AARP. I mean, we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. And education, I mean, if we can teach every child how to read and eventually make it through college, I mean, we would end domestic violence, poverty, and gang violence throughout our city. So thank you so much for extending this program throughout our city and other school districts. And I'll be making a motion if there's any other comments. I'd like to make a motion to approve this item.
I'll second, but I also have some comments.
Councilman,
Go ahead.
Madam Chair? Okay. Tim, thank you so much for all of your effort. I was honored to help Mayor Stanton kick this program off a couple of years ago. And the best thing that we could have done, or the greatest success comes from having Tim Valencia run this particular program, and several others having to do with education. Many people still will say that local government or city government and education, it just, may not go together. Education is not in the purview of local government, and I disagree with that. In fact, I think we all do at the Phoenix City Council, and this is an example of how we can make a positive impact with education. Now, much more has to be done. I continue to say that more has to be done at the state level, frankly. But this is an example of the city of Phoenix with the purview of local government making a positive impact through partnerships and just getting out there with our schools. Tim, you've done a great job of helping to create those partnerships, look for grant opportunities. You mentioned the books that council members read to students in Read Across America. I was one of those council members. What you didn't mention is those books. Actually, you did mention that those books were given to every student. What you didn't mention is those books were paid for by a grant, another grant opportunity that you were successful in getting for this program. So another step in a very positive direction. Congratulations. I know there's a lot more work to do, and I know there's already a motion on the table. I'll second that and absolutely support it.
thank you, Councilman Valenzuela.
Before we vote, I would like to call Greta Rogers to speak on this item.
Of course.
Thank you.
Good morning,
Morning.
Chairman Pastor and members of the commission. My name is Greta Rogers. I commend him for effecting, that's with an E, progress and success to date in this program. I'm one of the people who did not agree with Councilman Stanton when his primary pre-election program campaigning was to improve education, because it isn't the authority of the city by law in this state to do that. I'm glad this is being done. And what happens in grades 1 and 2 if they can't read? Do they go on to grade 3 because it's hopeless? That's certainly not a way to improve. But they always talk about reading at grade 3 level. Well, you have to learn to read before grade 3. 30 words a minute to 92, that's over 3 times. That's a giant leap forward. That's incredible. How many volunteers do you have to enable the success of this program to date?
To date, including this year, we have 182 volunteers that we will place in 16 schools.
Okay, that's also amazing and highly commendable. The percentage of bilingual or non-English speaking children who come into this program, have come into this program since its inception, Do you have that, do you know what that is or not?
I don't have that data in front
Okay.
of me, but it's about a third of them are ELL learners.
Okay, because that's a block to success to begin with. And particularly when they go home and the mother and dad or grandmother, or whoever's living there, speaks only another language, which is the language of the home. Cost to affect progress to date. That is through 6/30/15.
I'm sorry, what was that? I'm sorry.
The costs to affect the progress to date through 6/30/15.
We have a grant from Piper at approximately $135,000
And
this
that's
year.
covered your costs?
Correct.
Okay. Well, the purpose of reading is to increase literacy readiness rate, but begin before third grade. You know, this state has the most abysmal public school system in the nation, which is absolutely intolerable. But as long as we keep electing boneheaded R's to the legislature who have a heart that is basically stingy, nothing will change. So I don't criticize the teachers and the principals. The criticism goes to 17th in Washington, and it has. I've lived here 44 years, and it's never changed. It's only gotten worse. But literacy readiness, if they aren't literally ready by third grade, what do? Keep them back? And keep them back and keep them back? That causes a social problem in the grade school. So I commend you for this, and I commend the mayor for beginning it, and those who have stood with it and affected it. But
Greta.
we aren't at home plate yet.
No, we're not. We have many to continue to work on.
And I will contribute books if you
Absolutely,
call
I'll talk
me.
to you. I will do that.
My phone number is on the 10 most wanted list, not for positive reasons.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Councilman.
Just to add to that too, is our Head Start program is outstanding, and just recently we extended it to 0 to 3 years old. So even before a child is born, we're actually educating the mother on nutrition and how to raise a child and all that. So all that also adds to that. So thank you to our Head Start program and our early Head Start program also.
Thank you, Councilman Nowakowski, but I'd be remiss not, this is not a one-man show. Without the library department with Rita Hamilton and Wendy Resnick and team, this program could not have launched. So this is definitely a multi-departmental collaboration.
Before we vote, I would like to thank you and all the departments that are collaborating. I strongly believe in collaboration is that when we work together, we definitely see more. And just by fall benchmarks to spring benchmarks is amazing of what was done. Just in a matter of a one-on-one mentoring, teaching students within those 30 minutes how and quickly and way they learn to read. And so I commend all those volunteers for giving their hours, because if we didn't have the volunteers and weren't willing to give their time, we would be in a different state. So I would like to thank AARP for also providing the funding. Are we ready to vote?
Ready when you are.
All those for the motion, please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
All the motion carries. Thank you, Tim. The next item is item 8, information on the Phoenix IDA, and we will be welcoming John Salgado. And Paul Blue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm here with Juan today to share with you a bit of background on the IDA, their activity to date, their activity this year, and their proposed strategy for the current fiscal year that we're in for both the lending programs they are involved in with the industrial development bonds, as well as with their own revenue. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Juan to lead the presentation.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having us back again. I was looking at my calendar and realized that it was 1 year ago this month that we had the opportunity to present to your committee. So we have a lot that has happened over this last year. And so with that, I'll go ahead and get started. As Mr. Blue mentioned in his opening introduction, today is to give you an overview of our activity for primarily focusing on the last 3 years. But in the particular slide that you have in front of you is really a look at our issuance of bonds since January 2009. And the significance of January through to date is basically when the team that is currently in place took over the IDA. So for the purposes of today's presentation, I'll give you an overview of our bond activity, the fees that we generate, and essentially the use of those fees. And at the end of my comments is to give an overview of our plan for 2016 and seek your input and hopefully support. So with that, starting with the slide today, through June 30 of 2016, from January of 2009, we've issued a total of $1.5 billion in bond issuance. The largest portion of that is in education, which represents about 67% of the issuance that we've been involved with. If we go to the next slide, I'd like to focus on 3 projects that we've issued over the last couple of years. If we look at the first project to your left, it's the Girl Scouts, which is located in District 8. The total issuance on that was for $10 million, and the proceeds were used to construct the leadership center for the Girl Scouts known as Camp Sombrero. If we go over to your right is the Mayo Clinic, which is located in District 2. This is our largest transaction to date, which the issuance was for $180 million, and the proceeds were used for the construction of the proton beam radiation therapy facility. When this facility is up and running, they'll see over 2,000 patients annually. And if we look at the middle of the page, multifamily project known as the Hill and Dell, located in District 6. The issuance of that was for $8.7 million. It's affordable housing for approximately 139 units. So those are 3 examples of projects we've financed recently. If I move on to the next slide, want to talk a little bit about our Community Impact Fund. The Community Impact Fund was created by the board at the end of 2012. The board initially set aside or allocated $5 million in terms of what we use as patient capital. So this was money that we were asked to deploy into the community with the intent that we would get it back within a certain period of time. So the board adopted a policy that outlined the particulars of this activity. So for fiscal years 2013 to 15, this kind of gives you a snapshot of the investments that we've been involved with, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them as we go through there. Obviously, the largest part is in land. 2 projects which we're significantly proud of. The first one is the West Fillmore property, which is a site, as you know, on 7th and Fillmore, located in District 7. The total acres involved were about 2.9. The total acres involved were about 7 acres, of which we were involved in investing a little over half of them. The total idea investment in this project was about $2.9 million. The RFPs have been approved. There is a individual group that is moving forward. I think they'll begin the council process this week and then end up in front of council, I believe, sometime in November. And that will be for the development of 600 units in this community. The project to the right is the Art House, which is an infill housing project located in District 4. This was our first venture with the city of Phoenix. It was 3 lots, small lots, right behind the Opera. So we were involved in the total cost on that was about $350,000, of which we invested $150,000. Today, last year, that project was sold to Art House Development, and so they're in the process of building 25 for-sale condos. The price range of those condos are between $156,000 to $490,000. Some other examples of uses of the Community Impact Fund. The first is the Levine machine located in District 6. Proceeds for this were used to help restructure debt we're involved in doing a joint loan with the Arizona Multi-Bank for a total of $500,000, of which we invested $250,000. The center is the Lucy's Healthy Market, which is located on District 6. They received a loan of $374,000. In this particular project, our role was to provide a collateral reserve for this particular loan. Without our involvement, this loan wouldn't have been made. So proceeds on this for this particular store were used to expand the facilities. And over to the right is the Adelante Healthcare Facility in District 5. We were involved in a participation of the expansion and restructure some of their debt. Total loan on that was over $2 million, of which we participated in $250,000. The next slide is to talk a little bit about our Community Development Fund. Now, the Community Development Fund was created at the beginning of 2011, and the fund was created as a result of the council support of the IDA issuing bonds outside the state of Arizona. In the last couple of years, all the fees that we received out of those transactions have gone to support projects in Arizona. The Community Development Fund is specifically to help support projects and programs within the city of Phoenix. What you have in front of you is a snapshot of our activity over the last 3 years, totaling over $207 million in investments that we've made during that period. A large portion of that is affordable housing. The significant thing to know about this is that as we've continued to move forward, the funds that I noted, that the 2.7, are the funds that we've invested, but we've leveraged that with other partners. A significant partner for us has been the Arizona Community Foundation. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about some joint programs that we've been involved with the Arizona Community Foundation. And by way of background, I believe it was in 2013, we started our essential partnership, which we invested $100,000 each. And so we rolled out an initiative primarily focusing on education. The following year, we increased that amount to $250,000 each, so an aggregate total of $500,000. So a lot of the programs that we're going to talk about here, or at least introduce, are the result of that second initiative. If I may ask you to look at the picture on the left, which is the Valley of the Sun YMCA, the Why Not program. Total investment on that was for $25,000, and that was to support workforce housing development program for unemployed youth between the ages of 16 to 24. Moving over to your right is the United Way Valley of the Sun rehab, rapid rehousing program. As you recall, a couple of years ago, we had a major crisis dealing with homeless downtown, and there was an effort to try and raise $2.5 million to address the overcrowded parking lot. And so we were asked by the mayor to consider, and supported by the board, to essentially support the effort with an investment of $1 million. This was a joint partnership with the Maricopa IDA, which they also invested $1 million. The balance of the $500,000 United Way is in the process of raising that. And proceeds for this are planned to be used to essentially place 250 individuals in housing over the next year or so. If you look at the picture to the bottom left, UMOM, the family shelter, UMOM is participating in this rapid rehousing program. They are one of the vendors and providers that will help assist place the individuals. So they received a grant for $640,000 of the $2.5 million to assist in placing 150 individuals. Their target is 100 men and 50 women. On the right side, Circle of Cities. This is Health Agency for Homeless. There was an investment of $25,000 to provide care to homeless individuals. And as I understand, the city of Circles is the first Arizona Medical Respite Center, so we're proud to be involved with that as well. And that is located in District 4. A few more examples of investments that we made, starting in the left-hand corner of the presentation, is the ASU's College of Nursing, which is the Student Health Outreach for Wellness, which is located in District 7, I guess also known as SHOW. The investment for that was for $50,000, and that is to provide clinic and health education for homeless. In the center is Neighborhood Ministries, which is located in Council District 7. An investment of $25,000 was made to support workforce development programs for low-income individuals. And to the right is another investment to UMOM to support the homegrown program located in District 8. There was a total investment of $50,000 for workforce development for homeless and the working poor. In this particular program, we're particularly excited because they're really focusing on food service and cafe training of the individuals. And as you see from the picture, there's a young lady that is involved in the program. So that concludes an overview of our activities for the past 3 years. And if there are no other questions about some of the investments that we've made or programs that we've offered, I'll now move into the last segment of my presentation. This is the part that I'm seeking your support. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that we're planning for the fiscal year 2016. The first is our public finance plan. The public finance plan, as you know, involves the issuing of bonds. We talked about that in the initial slide. The priorities are listed as you have them before you. The first one is healthcare. The healthcare consists of assisted living facilities, healthcare providers, hospitals. I'm proud to say that the board has approved a total of 3 assisted living facilities, primarily targeted at veterans and disabled. In fact, Councilwoman Pastor will be in front of council with a new facility on 3rd Avenue and Indian School, which is our most recent one. Moving on to community economic development, this is the focusing on multifamily projects. We're now starting to see the market pick up a little bit more, and then also 501c nonprofits, and this could be 501c3s or other types of 501c's. In fact, some examples of the ones that we've done in the past were the Girl Scouts, which they, as a 501c3 nonprofit, were eligible to seek bonds through our initiative. The next is tax exempt for manufacturers program. In fact, we're rolling this program out as we speak. This afternoon, we're meeting with CED, and then next week we'll have an announcement. This is a particular effort to target small manufacturers around the city of Phoenix. So working in participation with the Community Economic Development Program, or the Community Economic Development Department, as well as Alliance Bank, will roll out this initiative again, targeting small manufacturers. Last but not least is education. 3 areas of focus, starting with district schools, higher education, and charter schools. The district schools is something that I'm particularly proud of. This is a call that we were asked by the mayor to try and figure out a better way to support districts. We have come up with a financing structure, and I'm proud to say that we're in conversations right now with the Scottsdale Unified School District to finance the reconstruction of Tonaleo School, which is located in South Tucson, which will primarily target moderate low-income students in that area. So that is, I had a presentation in front of the governing board last month, and so as we're working through the process, the likelihood that it'll come before council sometime at the end of this year. So that concludes our business finance plan. The next one is our residential mortgage programs. This is something that we really revved up in 2012, starting with our Home and 5 Advantage mortgage origination program. I think you've heard me talk about this in the past. This is something we're extremely proud of. In July of this last year, in joint partnership with the Maricopa County, we've provided loans to over 6,200 families throughout Maricopa County for over $1 billion in mortgage originations. So those loans were done in participation with over 105 mortgage bankers throughout our community. As we move forward into this coming fiscal year, We will be announcing in participation with the mayor and council an investment of about $250,000 to help support an additional down payment assistance grant targeting not only veterans, but first responders and teachers. And so this is an initiative or target that we'll are very excited about, that we hope will create home opportunity for those individuals with a slightly additional down payment assistance. Two other initiatives that we're announcing this year, a continuation under the brand of the Home in 5. We will roll out in October 1st a conventional loan product, which will be a similar type structure to the Home in 5, which offers only FHA and VA. So this also allows us the opportunity to reach a wider set of prospective home buyers. And last but not least, Councilman Pastor, you had mentioned, I think, in our last presentation and talked about the mortgage credit certificate. So I am proud to say that we've researched the program, and that also will be rolling out sometime in October. So initially, that program will be made available to residents in Phoenix, and then this is a program that the county is not involved with, but will later. And once they work with us, the program will be expanded to support prospective homeowners throughout the county of Maricopa. The Community Impact Fund, mentioned earlier, we saw some of the examples, the West Fillmore project. Initially, the board had committed $5 million. Last year, we increased that to $10 million, and so at the end of the fiscal year, the amount was increased to $14 million. And that, again, is money that's patient capital that we're asked to deploy. Our goal is we're in the process of developing a strategy for fiscal year 2016. So we will continue to work closely with CED in financing some of the projects that they've brought before us. We'll also consider exploring the great success we've had in taking advantage of the market by investing in land in participation with the city. We're also in conversation with other nonprofit, I guess we want to call them financial intermediaries, like Maricopa County IDA and the Arizona Community Foundation, to develop initiatives or programs to help support small businesses. And last but not least, working on an energy efficiency loan program with the Arizona Bank and Trust to primarily target district schools in retrofitting their facilities for better energy use. Moving on to the almost to my last slide is the Community Development Fund. I mentioned earlier that the proceeds that we receive from non-Arizona projects have been involved in supporting our Community Development Fund. Last year, when we made the investment of $1 million, it really depleted our funds for the next couple of years. But recognizing the positive impact that this fund has made to the community, the board elected to invest another $2 million to support programs in Phoenix beginning this fiscal year. The program will be essentially divided into two areas, one for homeownership assistance of $1 million, and then another $1 million for the Community Development Fund. This year, we're entering into formal relationship with the Arizona Community Foundation to help us assist with administering the program and rolling out the funds. So that, Madam Chair, members of the committee, concludes my presentation. As I mentioned in the beginning, wanted to give an overview of our program since we last joined you a year ago, and then seek your support for our programs, or at least initiatives, for this coming fiscal year.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I do want to be very clear. We both received your direction to be here, and we think it's important to share with you what the IDA is doing as well. We're working hard to make sure the City Council has great clarity on what are the priorities that the IDA is pursuing programmatically. So those discussions of healthcare, education, manufacturing are what we're asking for the subcommittee and ultimately the City Council to help approve. Is these are the themes that you would endorse the IDA board to go pursue. Any individual projects whether it's by way of investment by the IDA, some of which there are occasions when there's collaborations with CED that those come to the city council, but many of these would never actually, the home certificate programs, mortgage programs don't come back to the council. That's an independent action of the IDA board. And so I want to make sure we're very clear. What we're asking for is your conceptual approval of the themes of what they're going to go pursue as activity, because what we do not want to do is have the council surprised when we come back with individual, whether it is bond proposals from individual users. We want to make and have your feedback, advice, and direction before we bring those, so that there is no surprise later, and that we help you provide us the best direction possible, so Juan and the full IDA team know what is necessary. And with that, we'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Councilman Nowakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, just applaud all the great work that you're doing. I think you heard us loud and clear that we really want to go out there and help out those small businesses that were struggling during that economic downturn. And this is really some seed money for those individuals to improve those businesses that they've had here for years and years and years, and that we're being good partners with those individuals. With the healthcare, I mean, the need for healthcare and the opportunity, especially for those individuals that are homeless or that have a disability, that sometimes there's not that grant monies that are out there, that you're providing some help for those individuals, and basically education. I mean, one of the big things we talked about earlier is teaching young kids to read in our Head Start programs, our after-school programs, and our libraries and all that, but now even helping out to build schools. I mean, just incredible. And the 6,200 families that we provided mortgages so that they can actually own their first home. I mean, that's just incredible and awesome job that you're doing, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
That's good.
Councilman Valenzuela. Oh, Councilman Waring.
You first, or?
It's okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Matter with
So
that.
other cities have similar organization doing similar things.
If you're asking me about IDAs, there's about 45 IDAs in the state of Arizona.
I was thinking more nationally, or
Yes, there's a lot of issuers around the country
I see.
that support conduit issuances like we do.
Councilman Valenzuela.
First, John, thank you so much for all the work that you do, and all the board members. I think they're
Thank
all
you.
doing such a great job. I love the idea of investing in healthcare and education, manufacturing, and really drilling down even now with the startup community, the entrepreneurial space that the Phoenix IDA is also supporting. I think you know how much I support you and all of these programs and investments. I'm supportive. What I want to do is ask a couple of questions now. I think with the motion, and I want to make the motion to approve staff recommendation, understanding that this is a conceptual plan, right, around healthcare, education, manufacturing. There are some you gave some specific examples, which I think we need to get clarification on, because I know that, I have some colleagues that potentially would declare a conflict if that's what it comes down to. So with that said, can we ask our city attorney to come
Sure.
forward?
Why don't we have Mr. Holm, the city attorney, come to the table, and I'm sure out of abundance of caution, folks can declare where they may have conflicts, recognizing what we're asking you to act on, I believe, involves no specific projects, and is really a conceptual policy request, not an approval of any specific or individual project.
So it sounds like it's more of an umbrella. This is the conceptual policy that we are passing or voting on. But I think what comes into question is there were some specific examples given. And so I'm sure we just need some clarification on what exactly we're voting on today.
Councilwoman Pastor, Councilman Valenzuela, you're voting just exactly as Paul said on the overall concept of going forward. And in that sense, there isn't a direct conflict. In the past, the IDA has funded some projects that various council members sat on boards for or whatever. And so out of an abundance of caution, we wanted you to be aware of that. But in the end, on this matter, there isn't a direct conflict today. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Some of these plans have yet to be solidified and will be voted on in the future by the mayor and council, but they're in this plan. So by supporting it today, are we putting the cart before the horse on some of those plans?
Councilwoman Pastor, Councilman Valenzuela, I'm not sure that I completely understand the question. What I understand is we're voting for I'm sorry, Councilman.
No, go ahead.
Councilman Pastor. I think we're voting on the concept of the plan going forward, not on specific projects. In the past, the IDA has funded some specific projects with respect to which various members of the council, again, have been on the boards of. Those will be presumably will be brought forward in the future for specific votes, and at that time, that would be the time to declare a conflict.
Okay.
So I want to get some I need more clarity on this.
Perfect.
What is the motion? The motion that I have is that we would be voting on the 2015-2016 plan. Okay. And that would include, would that include attachment A all the way through D?
No, Madam Chair, the plan is listed on page 31 and on to page 32. And that references the targeted activities in the areas of public finance, the utilization of the residential mortgage programs. It is in the board's intention to increase funding in the Community Impact Fund and to increase funding into the Community Development Fund. Attachment A through D are all historical documents that represent the activities that the IDA has undertaken under its charter from the Phoenix City Council in times past.
So how I'm reading it, attachment A through D are items from their date. I'm just going to use January 9th to June 15th. So we've already approved, or these items have already happened. So we're approving we're approving the 2015-2016 plan that includes the public finance, the residential mortgage programs, Community Impact Fund, and the Community Development Fund.
Yes, and most specifically, Councilwoman, you are not, at this point, we are not asking for your specific action on any individual projects in these areas. That actually is broadly, you have a delegated function you've delegated down to the IDA board.
Correct. So we're just voting on the big picture and with these items, these pillars, I'm going to call them pillars, in here. And this is the conceptual that we will, as we move towards the future, this is what we're looking at regarding funding.
Yes.
Correct. So where there are situations, so as an example, in public finance, these are items that typically are going to come back to the city council because under state law, you are required to authorize a resolution. But we don't, you will see those projects as they come. And if there is concern about conflict, that'll arise in those days. The other items that are on here broadly are about allocation of existing resources towards programmatic efforts. If there's an occasion for the city council because of CED being or other city department being involved and work with the IDA, that would come before the city council at that time. And we have no list currently of projects to which we would be directly pursuing this money today. So we're not asking for your approval. It's just the conceptual allocation of the money. And it's really about giving direction to the IDA board and saying, yes, we agree you're headed in the right direction.
Okay. So I'm just, the reason why probably the public is curious as to why we're going into this dialogue. For example, and I'm going to use myself, on page 40, Attachment D, this to the Maricopa Community College Foundation, I have a conflict with. However, that's already been approved, and I already, I remember calling it a conflict. So we're not voting on this, we're voting on the plan. Got
Yes,
it.
ma'am. That
So
is
I
exact-
think that's where the confusion was
No problem, apologize.
amongst ourselves,
No problem.
because many of us then had conflicts. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion? Councilman Waring.
So we already had motions written out to address, I think all, the three of us over here had. Yeah, I'd prefer to just stick with that plan if we
Okay.
could. Michael, are you?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think that will entail at least two different motions. I don't know what you want to do, but.
Okay. I'll make the motion to recommend to the city council endorsement of the main elements of the Phoenix IDA's 2015-2016 plan, except for the items related to Maricopa County community colleges, Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, and the West Fillmore property.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion
No, I-
passes. You want to say something?
Well, I'm asking, Paul, I mean, obviously, these things are part of the plan. Does that motion satisfy what you're trying to do, or should we go back and have a vote giving my colleagues an opportunity to declare conflict on each?
So all of those items you listed, I will defer to Mr. Salgado, but I do not believe we have affirmative going forward new actions that we are asking of the city council at this time to enter into in those areas.
Yeah, Madam Chair, they said they weren't doing specific programs, so
Right,
that should be it, right?
That's it. We
That's
don't foresee any reason why you would need to act again. If we were to come back to the council on specific issues for the organizations you listed, you would know that, you would see it, and you would have the opportunity to declare conflict on a formal council meeting when that occurs.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
It passed. Next now with, I'm sorry. Greta, I just got the item.
I just want to say that I am so happy that we are so blessed that as a city to have Juan Salgado directing this IDA program, and he's been doing it since it began with this city. He is one of the 5-star stars of city staff, and there are only about 5 of them.
All right, Juan.
Okay.
High praise indeed, Juan.
And economically, better than anyone in this entire city, in all the years I've lived here, and in all the years, which is almost 20, that I've been coming down here and yakking. So be damn glad you have him, because you'll have a hard time finding an equivalent when he retires.
Thank you, Greta. Thank you,
All right.
Juan.
Don't.
Go give Greta a hug, Juan. So, we're on to, with all my papers up here. We're on to item 10? 9? Okay. Item 9 is missing out of my books. Okay, item 9. Item 9, city services card update. Tony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Pastor and subcommittee members. Over the summer, we continued our research on the possible creation of a city services card. And with me today is Debbie Cotton, Chief Information Officer for the city. She's going to talk about the technology research that we've concluded.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to present our findings of our work over the summer. As requested by the subcommittee, we looked at a number of city departments and the existing cards they have from which the public can receive services. In particular, we looked at the Parks Department, the library, human services, golf, and public transit. One of the things that we want to point out is that each of these departments has acquired the business system that they need to manage their resources. So, for example, when the library identified a need to update their library system, they really looked at the industry, the library industry, and what was the best system that could be acquired to provide the needs for their patrons. Same with the Parks Department. The Human Services Department is using the same system as the Parks Department, so they're sharing a resource. The golf industry department did the same thing. They want to know what are the best systems out there for golf and tee times. And then the public transit system also has their own system. So each department has the system that they need to meet their unique business requirements. The data in these systems is not shared one system to another. Once again, these are different systems, and there really is no need to share data at this point. There has not been. We also like to point out that the data in each system is protected and secure in accordance with city standards and compliance of the credit card payment industry known as PCI. And the reason that that's very important is that you all know about all the cyber attacks that are going on. So we want to be sure that our systems are protected and secure. Additionally, the subcommittee wanted us to look at the potential of possibly adding pictures or having a smartphone capability. To date, these systems do not have pictures on them. It's our understanding that the Parks Department previously had pictures on their cards. However, the cost of that, the maintenance, the cameras, the printing, all of that was something, and they decided as a budget reduction to remove that feature. And at this point in time, the only smart card capability is very limited, and that would be with the public transit system. So our research is really providing us no pictures at this point, and smart cards really only available with the public transit option. Additional options that you asked us to explore, some type of an integrated system. We have done some research, and there is no system off the shelf that we could go and buy so that we could integrate all of our systems in order to produce a city services card. However, we could work with the private sector and potentially create something, but there is nothing that we can buy today that does that. Because as I go back to my earlier point, each system is unique, meeting the business requirements of that particular department. We did reach out to our friends at the state of Arizona because what we believe is that this could be a very similar solution to Service Arizona, and that's the system that is used by the Department of Motor Vehicles, where you go and you get your driver's license and all of the services provided by the state. We're still researching that. That system was put in around 2000. Many of the players at the state have changed, and so we're still waiting on information. But what we do know is that that is a partnership between the state and a private corporation, and we do know that there are user fees involved in the acquisition of that card.
So thank you, Debbie. And this is the last slide of our presentation, and it basically sums up what we are looking to accomplish. And it would be taking the library, the senior center, the Parks and Rec, and the golf cards, leaving the Valley Metro or the transit cards to come in perhaps a different phase of the project because they already use smart cards, where all of the cards in the green boxes currently use barcode technology. So if we combined all of those cards into one, a city services card, over on the right-hand side of the screen, we believe the cost would be approximately $5 million, and that's for the consulting services, the hardware, and the software. As Debbie mentioned, the department's systems currently don't talk to one another, so we would need to invest in a system that could enable the department's various business applications to talk to one another. Also included in that approximate cost is training and public outreach. As part of approximate savings, there may be a savings in the future. We estimated about 25,000 is the initial savings, and that would simply be because we would not be issuing all of these cards. We would be combining them all into one card, so the card stock would be the savings opportunity. And that concludes our presentation today.
Councilman Waring?
Thank you. So $5 million outlay, $25,000 maybe savings. So 200 years to recoup our initial investment.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, that is our estimate. That is correct. As we said, the three systems in question, the library system, the park system, and the golf system, are separate. They do not talk together today. They do not share data today. So in order for us to be able to create a single city services card, we would need the assistance of the private sector in developing a system, as it does not exist today.
So in tough budget times, obviously $5 million outlay, the 200-year return on investment, which is outside all of our term limits. And we are politicians, so I'm not sure that's going to fly. But I don't know. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels. That just seems like it's a non-starter.
Councilman?
So I have a question. How much are we spending in technology? I mean, we're upgrading all of our infrastructure at the city. We're updating all of our computers. We're trying to communicate with each other. How much are we spending? It's close to about $30 million or so, right?
Well, thus far, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, thus far in terms of the upgrades we've done this summer, we've upgraded our email system and our calendaring system, which is approximately $1.5 million. We're in the process of seeking authority to upgrade our telephone system, which would be $35 million. And those are the projects that we have in play right now.
So with all these upgrades, I thought we were going to try to figure out a way that we can all start to communicate with each other, use each other's resources, instead of having, 8 different cards out there with 8 different systems, and basically using, there's no data gathering there where we can all just, as a council member, if I wanted to find out how many people are using our senior centers, our youth centers, our libraries, there's not just one system that I can go to pull that out. I would have to go to each and every department to pull that, right?
That is correct, Councilman. At this time, there is no one central system.
So as a city, are we trying to look for a system that we can actually bring all the departments under one, and that we can actually start to function and use technology to its fullest?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, it's a great question, and it's a great thought. However, at this point, the business of each department and their business requirements is different and unique. And therefore, I am not aware of any system that will allow us to do that. The reason that the library has a system is that it's integrated into running a library. The reason that the golf system is different is because it's focused on managing golf courses. Those two business requirements are totally different and unique. And the only common data they would usually share would be obviously the citizen data, the name, the address, and those high-level bits of information. But the rest of it is different and will remain different.
I mean, aren't there conferences out there for leagues of cities and all that where you have vendors that have programs that interface with other departments? I mean, I've been to conferences where I sit and I listen to people that see that I'm a council member, and they try to pitch their software to us that connects the water department, parks, all these different departments together. I mean, have we looked at those types of vendors? Have we been to conferences? I was just walking through and I was attacked by vendors. I know that there's programs out there that interface each other and that use the barcode to do that. I'm not really sure about the pictures and all that, but I'm trying to, I can't believe that we're in 2015 and somebody hasn't come up with a system that interfaces all the different departments for a sixth largest city like ours.
Sure, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, and that is our recommendation for a $5 million system. As we said, there is nothing that exists today, and I understand that when you go to conferences, vendors are very gracious and they really want our business. However, it doesn't exist today. So a vendor would have to come in, they would have to interview each department, they would have to understand those requirements. They would also have to touch each system in order to get that data out of the system. And so that's why we have the $5 million price tag. Regardless of what the vendor community tells you, this system does not exist today in the marketplace. There has to be research, there has to be analysis, there has to be programming, there has to be a hardware acquisition, and that costs money. And it does not exist today. You cannot, no vendor can tell you that they can go into their archive and pull it out and give it to us tomorrow. It does not exist.
All right.
So we would have to create it then.
Someone, well, we wouldn't say we would create it, we
Well,
would
we
certainly
would
work with the vendor community.
Work with a vendor.
Yes,
or look
Councilwoman.
look
Yes, Madam
to-
Chair.
Look for a vendor who could create that piece or technology that would satisfy all the different departments.
That is correct, Councilwoman,
Now,
Madam Chair.
in this analysis, does it demonstrate what each department uses the system for?
We have actually the department heads here, and they can actually speak to their business needs much better than I can, and they are here to talk about that.
But I guess my question in the research is, did we cross-reference with the software of saying, okay, this one takes this software or this purpose takes name, address, I don't know what else, whatever else needs to go in for information. Is this in common with the parks? Is this in common? What is the area that is in common and what is the area that is not in common, in order to understand what additional information is needed other than a name, address, and phone number?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we know theoretically and then from a very high level that the only common data would be the citizen data. The name, the address, the telephone number, that is what transcends it all. The other information we know is very different because the business of that department is different. So for example, if you're in the park system, you are wanting to go and perhaps register for a class at a particular facility, at a particular date, at a particular time, at a particular cost. That is going to be very different from what's happening in the library. In the library, their system is really an all-inclusive business system that includes everything from accounting and finance to acquisition of their media to interfacing with their vendors. They're just really very, very different businesses.
What would be the cost to build our own
Well,
program or software? $5 million?
That is what we estimate, Madam Chair, based upon proposals that we've received from the vendor community in the past. That is our estimate, but we do want to say it is an estimate. We have not gone out and talked to the vendor community. We have not put together a request for information
Okay.
to delve into, but that is our best estimate.
So we could do a request for information just to have some knowledge.
Yes, we could,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Councilman Valenzuela?
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, combining all of those cards into one. Now, understanding that there's a cost, we weren't sure. In fact, this is the first estimate that we are hearing about. At the end of the day, I think people would rather have one card than what Tony's walking around with there.
There's quite a few. There are
With
about a
several.
dozen. Yes,
Yeah, with several cards.
about a dozen.
And, efficiency is a big deal, it's progress. And so trying to figure this out, and at the end of, you don't know what it's going to cost. The estimate's $5 million, but there hasn't been requests for information.
Correct.
How old I'm sorry, let me back up. Debbie, you were talking about just a few minutes ago, some of the upgrades that we've made to our IT and the investments. It's $1.5 million for this, and it's X amount of million for this, and the things that have already taken place. How new or archaic is the IT system program for each of those departments? Are they fairly new, or are we having to replace those? Are we missing an opportunity to roll those budgets into trying to make something happen here so that they could all talk together? I think that's, I'm sorry, go ahead, I'll let you answer.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We do have that information. So because Parks and Human Services are using the same system, that contract expires in November of this year. And they're paying annually maintenance about $175,000. The library system, that contract expires in December of 2018, and they are paying annually for annual maintenance $285,000.
And just to, Councilwoman and Vice Mayor, just to add to your additional part of your question, when were they acquired? The public libraries was acquired in 2007 originally.
That's my
and-
question. My question
I beg
is,
your pardon?
is it, when is it, I understand we are paying to maintain it. When is it time to upgrade it? And are we,
It's time to upgrade the park system now.
so that's going to cost us more than the figure you just gave us? That's probably going to cost.
That is correct. They will
Okay,
have to go
that's-
out and do, correct,
So that's my
sir.
question. If it's going to cost us, I don't know how much. I mean, some of the other figures you gave went from 1.5 million to 35 million. So, and I don't, I mean, I don't pretend to know what you know in the IT world. I'm just thinking that if it's time, as the time comes and now we have to invest to upgrade those systems, are we missing an opportunity to make it more efficient? We don't know if it's really $5 million or if at the end of the day, through partnerships, maybe it's much less, or maybe there is no bottom line here. I'm sure there will be some sort of an investment, though. I mean, that's what it takes. Now, the Valley Metro Smart Card, I understand that's an entirely different system.
That is correct.
Have we spoken to Valley Metro about this potential at all? I guess if we move forward for a request for information, I would ask that we also speak with Valley Metro. We don't know how new their system is or when they plan to upgrade their system. And again, just trying to figure this out.
Vice Mayor, public transit has been part of our internal working team, but because they use the smart card technology, we had been putting them in phase 2, for example, because we have barcode technology for all of the current cards. But absolutely, we'll reach out to Valley Metro.
And Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we also know that the Valley Metro card was implemented in 2007, and we know that that contract expires in May of 2016.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you. So what would you get on further study that you haven't gotten now? Because you presented us, and I don't have it in front of me because it's several months old, when we first discussed this issue, I think New York was about $8.5 million to get something like this started. There were a couple others, maybe San Francisco was $5 million or something. So your $5 million isn't outside of that ballpark at all. In fact, as I remember, it might be even low. You also didn't seem that wedded to the idea that we're actually going to save money. I mean, that sounded, frankly, you seem less certain about that than you did about the $5 million. The city services card that is produced, so at the end of the expenditure of the $5 million or whatever, then there would be a card with a picture and all the doodads on it. Is that right?
That is correct, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee.
So you get a card with your picture. It wouldn't work as an identity card or anything. The state does that. I think we established that at the last hearing. I understand your point about the library card and the golf, for example. So you'd go to the golf course and you say, I just moved to Phoenix. I want a golf card. They'd enter your data. So now the library would also have it.
That is
Fantastic. But of course, signing up for tea times or selling golf shirts or selling lunch at the pro shop has absolutely nothing to do with checking out books, which I think is your point. The only thing the citizen would get out of it is if they went to the library, because they still have to go to the library to check out the books and all that kind of stuff, is they wouldn't have to sign up for a library card, which is great. It ain't worth no $5 million, but okay. I mean, that helps. I guess that's good. But I hadn't really thought about this before, that these are completely different, as you said, enterprises. They don't really, other than the fact that the city is running them, they don't really do in any way the same thing. So that's a nice thing, I guess. I don't know that there are lots of people. I got about as thick a wallet as anybody in this room. I can assure you of that. I have a library card. I don't know that anybody's walking around with more than probably a couple of those cards. But I guess for $5 million, that is kind of a surprising price tag. Given our experiences with technology in the past, take our RMS system with police, way overdue, over budget, lots of media stories about that, aggravating to everybody, quite frankly. I don't know how many calls I've gotten about it, just me. I can't speak for the other guys. So there's no guarantee after we invest $5 million that it's even going to work the way we want it to, given that it sounds like we'd be in uncharted territory. There isn't some company that this is what they do. We'd be contracting with them, cobbling something together, and then hoping it works. Estimates being what they are, maybe it'll be $5 million. My experience with these estimates is if you say it's $5 million, it's much more likely to be 8 than it is to be 2. So it's just an observation from years of doing this. So it seems pretty expensive given that we might be saving. You were not wedded to that, it didn't sound like, correct me if I'm wrong, $25,000 a year. Again, it takes 200 years to get that money back. So that people don't have to spend another 5 minutes signing up for a library card. It's good in theory, but the actual application, as I'm looking at your chart now, I don't see how anybody's going to justify it. But do as you will. So,
Councilman Nowakowski.
I'm kind of disappointed about this whole technology. I thought we were going to really be leaders and pioneers when it comes to technology, that we had an opportunity to really phase out all the old technology that we have, and that we were going to figure out a way to bring departments together. I mean, interfacing programs, systems. I mean, I run a radio station. I mean, we interface our trafficking, our production, our music. I mean, you don't have to have one program. It's a program that works, that you can interface other programs into. So are we looking at that, at the bigger picture? I mean, we're just touching the surface on the city service card, taking that out of the equation. I want to make sure that we're going to be spending our tax dollars wisely, not just buying the software that doesn't interface with another software. That's where I believe that the vice mayor was talking about, that we really need to look at some type of information and just get some information, and maybe a request for information out there to figure out not just the city service card, but all the different departments coming together and really interfacing their programs with this master program that we're going to create for the city of Phoenix. Because if we're going to invest millions and millions of dollars in the future, I want to make sure that we're interfacing all the departments together, and that we're communicating, and that we can provide customer service. Because at the end of the day, all this data, even though some people might not use the library, some people might not go golfing, but all that data comes into use when it comes to budgeting and where the services are being used, and all that data that we can gather. So how can we be those pioneers if there's no other city out there doing it? Dang, that's a great opportunity for the city of Phoenix to be the leaders throughout the country and actually create our own software that we can sell to other cities and make a profit off of it. So, I mean, I don't believe that there's no software out there that interfaces all this. But if somebody hasn't come up with that idea, I mean, damn, we can make millions and millions of dollars just by selling it to other cities.
Councilman Valenzuela.
One thing that they all have in common, the family that takes their children to the library, or the family that goes golfing, or the family who uses the senior centers, every one of those things, what they have in common is our tax dollars are paying for every one of those things. And if there's a card that gives our taxpayer the most bang for their buck, because they may only use the library, but you know what? Now you're able to take advantage of these other services that the taxpayer is paying for. I think that is worth research. I think it's absolutely worth research. Now, speaking of research, and I appreciate this. This is an information. This is where we are so far, and so my next question is, has there been research done regarding other cities who have a city services card and how they got there? I mean, many of them have done it through public-private partnerships. Have we considered, is it too early to consider any of those things?
Chairwoman Pastor and Vice Mayor, yes, we have done research. The most recent example, Councilman Waring mentioned it earlier, the most recent example is New York City, and they launched the card not with a public-private partnership, just on their own.
Are there any out there that have done it through public-private partnerships?
Yes,
that can
there
help
are.
offset that fee? That's what I would be interested in looking at.
Yes, there are. And it has been mentioned by the chairwoman and others that one next step we could consider is issuing an RFI, which is a request for information. And that's when you get more, we send out a proposal and we get more specifics back from companies out there that might offer this type of system.
And I want to make it very clear, I'm not here, I don't think anyone is, right now at this stage saying the city needs to go forward with this $5 million investment so that it can save $25,000. I think this is clearly in the informational stage. My concern is until we do that RFI, until we figure out what we can offset through public-private partnerships, until we can figure out when each of those systems are due to be replaced and how this could actually happen. That $5 million is a guess. And I personally think that it's premature to even, throw, and I understand it's a guesstimate and that's what was expected and that's what was asked of you. I get that, but that $5 million figure and the savings of approximately $25,000 is coming way before we get the information to actually figure out realistically what this means. And so I think we should certainly, and I don't think we could do it in this particular, or can we make that motion? But I mean, look, it's worth research. What is it going to cost for us to do some research? And, I think that would be a good use of time.
My question is going to I'm going to hit the parks. And I think the parks software was, do I understand 2007?
Actually, November of this year, Madam Chair.
Yep.
The parks software, the contract expires
In
November of 2015.
And what will be the cost to purchase the software again? And what was the initial cost?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, we actually don't have out-of-pocket costs. What happens is people pay registration fees, and then in turn, the company gives us back the money because we don't touch the money. The money goes into the account. They pay for the specific fee, the percentage or whatever we've agreed to, and then so we don't have out-of-pocket costs initially. I do not know. I'd have to get the information about the original purchase price.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, according to our research with parks, the initial cost was $101,000 in 2013.
And so over time, what has changed is the way that credit cards have been. We have a hosted service now as opposed to we take in the money and deal with that just to get out of the credit card compliance issues, yes.
Okay. All right. But we're going up for renew November.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we actually have held off putting the RFP out because we wanted to see where this was going. So we have the ability to extend it for a year, which is what we intend to do once we get further direction.
Okay. With approximately, what's the budget for that?
Again, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, there's no out-of-pocket cost, right?
Got it. And library?
Okay. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we understand that the library's initial outlay for their system in 2007 was $1.8 million. And we understand that they are paying approximately $300,000 annually in maintenance fees,
Okay.
and that contract expires in December of 2018.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Oh, Councilman Waring.
Thank you. So,
Thank you.
let's say you cut the 5 million in half, it's still 100 years. Let's say you cut it to 1 million, so you cut it by 5, it's still 40 years to get your money back. I am with Councilman Nowakowski. I'm a little surprised that this is not something that's already been done or that other places aren't doing it. But I can also see why, given the difference between the library and the golf, as we discussed earlier. I guess for me, given how fast technology is changing, given that Uber didn't even exist, 5 years ago or whatever it is, all these things, they're saying what the computers double every 18 months, what they can do, and obviously these phones didn't even exist 10 years ago. I think several of us, including Councilman Gates, who runs the Efficiency Committee and the Innovation Committee, eventually maybe we're not going to have cards. The price of these has fallen so much already. They're still expensive, but certainly the trend is in a few years. I just wonder if people are going to have a stack of cards like that or a wallet as thick as mine with coupons and so forth. For example, I love using coupons. My wife and I go out to eat. Restaurants now send me the coupons. I don't clip a coupon. Well, even a few months ago, a few of them still made you print the coupon. And now I've noticed several of them have changed just in the last few months. Just show us your phone, because it's silly to print something out that they could just scan off a phone. Certainly people are getting ahead of this game. I assume we're going to get there too. Normally it would be nice to be aggressive, but at the price tag, given that next year we're projecting a deficit of like $40 to $60 million. So with this not being in the budget as currently constituted, now we'd be bumping that up to 45 million to 65 million automatically. That doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense in this context, given, as I mentioned earlier, what we're getting for this. But I do think the time for something like this on the phone is probably coming. Normally I wouldn't caution patience in something like this, but that price tag is a little shocking. I thought we'd be saving more than that, frankly. I'm pretty surprised and it sounded like that was like the biggest estimate, that maybe it might be zero or it might even cost us extra money. We also have, as far as the pictures, realistically, it sounds like Parks had the pictures and they were of such negligible value that when we hit the budget wall, it sounds like that was the first thing to go. Or you didn't even say it was necessarily when things took a downturn in 2008. Do you know when they got rid of the pictures? They may have done it just because they weren't getting bang for the buck before that. I guess Ingrid's going to tell us.
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, it was actually a cost savings for us because the cards with the picture cost more to produce than just a black and white card that didn't have a picture.
And we do think sometimes they're more expensive because you get something for that, but apparently you guys felt that really the benefit was not equal to the cost. I mean, I assume that's why you would
Madam
cut that
Chair,
cost.
members of the subcommittee, some of the staff really valued the picture because it was something that they could tell who the person was coming in. But in the end, we made a budget decision in that case.
Yeah. So, I mean, the pictures, I don't know. Last time we had this discussion, obviously people were talking about this like it was going to be an ID card. We're not seeming to have that discussion this time, which is good. I hope we established that this would not be really used as any kind of credible ID card, and that the state is the one that decides what's an actual identification card. This is a library card, golf course card, Parks and Rec card, and nothing more. So we've set that aside. For that, $5 million, when probably in a few short years, we might be able to just set something up on the phones and be done with it and call it a day. So just food for thought. I mean, because it is an expensive. I'd hate to see us go down this road, get our card, and then 5 years from now we're sitting around going, time to get rid of the cards. Well, we already spent that $5 million. So that's not coming back. It's not coming back for 200 years, I guess.
So I guess in the RFI, and I probably need more education on this, is it possible to look at the very modernized technology as Councilman Waring has suggested, in the sense of, I think it's a good idea to look at looking at the fact that maybe if we could exist without a card and what the cost of that software would be, and then be able to be able to deliver or do the different items that are needed into that software. Because I think that's a good idea, moving that way, because all that information's there and it's in a system.
Yes.
But you're correct. Some may want a card. So how do we live in both worlds?
Can I just say one thing to that, since you're, if you don't mind? I don't want to be elitist. I understand everybody doesn't have these phones,
Sure.
and not everybody has computer access, so I'm not saying today, but the price of these are dropping. Obviously, a few short years ago, not everybody had a cell phone. Now, the majority of people do, so much so that they don't even have home phones. That's changed completely in the last 10 years. I don't have a home phone anymore. My dad doesn't. I mean, it's kind of amazing that people who are wedded to technology, it's now completely changed. But just in 2 short years with this, my wife didn't have one of these phones until I got one for her birthday because she didn't really need it. She wasn't online. But the price dropped like 5 times in 2 years for basically the same product. I mean, if you keep going by that, all of a sudden they're going to be $10 or $20 or $50 or whatever, and most people are going to have them. And that's where you can save city taxpayers a lot of money by not printing up these cards, which does, I'm sure, cost money. So that's why I was saying, but I don't want people out there to be like, oh, well, he's assuming everybody has, I understand people of a certain generation maybe aren't using these phones and everything, but that time is coming, I would say sooner than we think, probably. So,
And
just wanted to add.
Chairwoman Pastor and subcommittee members, that is in an RFI, we are in control of the information that we are asking for, so we can most certainly ask for cards and then also state-of-the-art technology using smartphone
And
technology.
if possibly in the state-of-the-art technology of the software, is there a card component?
Yes. We will absolutely, we can include that.
Councilman Nowakowski?
Even the fingerprints, right? So what happens is you go to a youth center, you put your thumb
Yeah.
on a machine and it comes out your picture and all the information on the computer itself. So, I mean, we need to really look at the future and how do we use technology to its fullest to really save resources. I hear the $5 million for just a city service card, but I'm talking bigger picture. How do we interface all of our offices together? So I'm not just talking about the card itself and the $5 million that it's going to cost us here, but how about the millions and millions of dollars that's going to cost for an overhaul of our whole system?
Yeah.
Yes,
And
Councilman
I,
Valenzuela.
there's a lot of direction. I mean, some people, there are people who don't want, my fingerprints is on file because I'm a first responder, Some people wish not to put their information out there, but some people may. The idea with the smartphones, I appreciate Councilman Waring's last comment on that. Some people are going to want a card. So, I mean, I guess that's the purpose of an RFI, right? To just research those things and bring back some options, I guess.
Does somebody want to make a motion?
So would the motion be to, I'll make the motion.
Okay.
My motion is to ask staff to put forth a RFI regarding the city services card that will include
All the items
potential
discussed.
public-private partnerships and items
Technology.
discussed. Technology.
Costs.
Of course, absolutely.
Absolutely,
The
we'll
costs.
include all of that.
Potential savings.
Do you have cards about this item?
I'm sorry?
No, I do
Cards?
not.
Oh, no cards, okay.
No, I do not
Surprising.
have any cards. So,
It's
there a
worth
second?
research.
second.
You second?
I second it.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
About, no?
Well, I'm waiting.
No,
Oh.
I'm not in favor of it.
Okay.
No.
So no?
Yeah, no.
So it's 2-2. So what happens? Who's our legal?
Still goes forward, I think.
It goes forward.
Okay. All right.
With no recommendation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Now we are moving to item 10, Phoenix Arts and Culture Commission 30th anniversary.
Good morning. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'm Gail Brown with the Office of Arts and Culture, and we're here to update you on the activities related to the Phoenix Arts and Culture Commission's 30th anniversary. So, as I'm sure many of you know, the commission was established by Mayor and Council in 1985, and this year, throughout 2015, we celebrate the exciting growth of the arts and culture sector that has taken place in Phoenix over the past 3 decades. Some of those achievements include 180 public art projects that have brought international recognition to the city, the expansion of cultural facilities from the Phoenix Art Museum to Ballet Arizona to the Black Theater Troupe, a continued investment in a community grants program that nurtures the development of cultural organizations, and arts and culture learning programs that speak to the creative imaginations of children and adults. I'd like to thank our commissioners, including Judy Giles, who's here with us today, one of our former chairs, and the commissioner that formed the 30th Anniversary Committee to help us plan a year of activities to celebrate this milestone. So we launched our 30th anniversary year in January with a series of advertisements. That's what you're looking at here on the screen. This was published in On Media. That's a program guide for many of the performing arts organizations in Phoenix, the opera, the ballet, Phoenix Theater, and others. And our first major event took place on April 17th at the Phoenix Art Museum with Phoenix Arts and Culture at 30, a conversation. This is a panel discussion about the origins of the commission and the programs of the office, which included Mayor Greg Stanton, former Mayor Terry Goddard, who was mayor at the time that the commission was formed in 1985, the first Arts and Culture Executive Director, Deborah Whitehurst, our first Public Art Director, Gretchen Friedman, our own Ed Lebo, currently our Public Art Director, and then some of our community representatives, including Black Theater Troupe Director David Hemphill, former Executive Director of the Phoenix Art Museum, Jim Ballinger, who was involved in many of the bond initiatives which helped grow these cultural facilities, and former Commissioner and Arts Advocate Bill Shepard. Mayor Stanton presented a proclamation acknowledging our 30th anniversary, seen here with our current chair, Donna Reiner, and the mayor. And ASU professor and poet laureate for the state of Arizona, Alberto Rios, was our MC. This was a very well-attended public event. A great many of our former commissioners attended, including many of those who were part of the first commission in 1985. This event was recorded, and an edited version will appear on Channel 8 World Channel Thursday, October 8 at 8 p.m. So arts and culture organizations sent messages of appreciation to the commission, to our office, and we created a website and social media campaign with these images. So I'm just going to show a few of these to you. Arizona Matsuri is one of many long-running community festivals we support through the grants program. Cultural organizations like the Heard Museum, supported through the General Operating Support grants, preserve our heritage and introduce us to emerging Native American artists. Ballet Arizona is an internationally acclaimed dance company, and in their new facility, their ballet school and community outreach programs are thriving. The Phoenix Center for the Arts offers a wide range of classes for artists and provides performance and incubator space for emerging organizations. And arts programs that serve young people, like Young Arts Arizona, are critical to the future of our city. I'm going to ask my colleagues here, Dwight Walth and Ashley Hare from the Office of Arts and Culture, to talk about our next big moment in our year of celebrations, October 3rd, Phoenix Arts and Culture at 30. Dwight?
Thank you. Good morning. So our next major event is on October 3rd. It coincides with National Arts and Humanities Month and with the traditional launch of the season for many of our arts organizations. Last year, you might remember that we invited 50 organizations to join us here in City Hall to showcase their upcoming seasons and activities. This year, we've invited all 160 arts and cultural organizations in Phoenix to participate, and we've moved our event to the Convention Center and Herberger Theater. Nearly 100 arts and cultural organizations will join us on October 3rd to celebrate arts and culture. Our marketing campaign for this event includes outreach through all of the council district offices and all participating organizations. We've partnered with Downtown Phoenix Inc. on marketing strategies. We expect that a major article will be in this Sunday's Arizona Republic. We've interviewed various of us with Phoenix New Times, Downtown Business Journal, and we have live interviews that are scheduled with Channels 12 and Channel 3 the Friday and the day of the event. We've provided materials in both Spanish and English for distribution through social media and other efforts, and we're making every effort to reach throughout the city with news of Celebrate. We're grateful to our sponsors for the event, Downtown Phoenix Inc., Phoenix Convention Center, Reimagine Phoenix, the Water Services Department, Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and the Arizona Commission on the Arts.
So when we look at the activities of October 3rd, we have a really filled day of lots of various activities. We have performances that will fill the Convention Center arcade as well as outside on the Showmobile. And these are organizations performing every hour from that 10 to 4 event in every art form that we have, and also all of our cultural organizations performing as well. The participants that come to the October 3rd and join us for the day will be able to interact with arts and culture organizations with hands-on activities. We'll have hands-on activities in 10x10 booths outside near the Showmobile, as well as indoors in the Convention Center, along with the performing organizations. On top of those hands-on activities, we have viewing artists that will be doing viewing demonstrations, making new art pieces on site for those joining us to watch and ask questions, as well as information booths from various arts and culture organizations. So those joining us for the day can participate in giveaways and gain more information about places they can go to and visit throughout Phoenix. Also, during the October 3rd event, we have the public art team, which will be conducting public art tours throughout the day of Convention Center installations. In the Herberger Center Theater, we also are presenting videos on public art, drawing attention to public art projects throughout the city that our residents may not be aware of. The unveiling of Phoenix Urban Guide will also be a presentation. This is a website map which identifies new and existing downtown destinations, including public art. We'll also show the video of the April 17th panel discussion prior to its airing on Channel 8 World October 8. We also have food trucks outside and information tables from dozens of organizations that will round out our day. It's a centipede.
So this free community event will, we hope, raise the visibility and increase awareness of the rich and diverse cultural life in Phoenix. We hope it will encourage audiences to take in a play or visit a museum or a gallery in October during Arts and Humanities Month. And through the hands-on experiences that Ashley described, we hope that they'll learn that they have some of their own art-making skills and abilities and talents. So we invite everyone to come out for the day, and for more information, for more information about the activities and the performances, the schedule, folks can go to PHX Arts and Culture at 30 Celebration. They can go to our website, phoenix.gov/arts/celebrate.
Thank you. That concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, I want to wish you congratulations on your 30th anniversary. It's going to be an exciting month, and especially on October 3rd from 10 to 4. I'm hoping that everybody comes and experiences it and continue. It's the start to continuing supporting our arts. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Councilman Nowakowski.
I mean, what a great way to showcase all of our arts and cultural diversity of our city of Phoenix and all the great programs and grants that you've given out throughout the years. So thank you so much for putting this together, and what a way to celebrate 30 years at our convention center at the Herberger. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also would like to thank you, congratulate you. It's really exciting seeing all of the photos as the presentation moves forward to really show the rich diversity that we have right here in the city of Phoenix. And it's exciting to see where this moves in the future. I mean, we have a growing Indo-American community here in Phoenix. I'll tell you, just in District 5, there are more than 40 languages spoken every day in District 5. And there's some really, you can learn so much just by coming out to some of these community meetings and celebrations. So just to see where we are, I'm so impressed and I'm proud of what you're doing. I'm proud to be a Phoenician and a native. And it's just really exciting to think of where we're going to be moving in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you on the 3rd.
Yes. Now we are on item, oh, my paperwork is all messed up today. Item 11, review of the budgets. Who would like to go first? Want me to go eeny, meeny, miny, moe?
I guess I'll go first.
Oh, okay.
It's Mo.
It's Mo today.
That's right.
Me? Yes. There we go. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'd like to present an update on our budget for the Office of Arts and Culture. So this number looks a little different than last year. Last year, the budget we presented to you was around $1.5 million, which was composed largely of personnel expenses and the grants program, which is $580,000. But beginning this fiscal year, we assumed tenant relations for 7 cultural facilities previously managed by the Public Works Department. So $2.3 million from Public Works was transferred into the Office of Arts and Culture's budget to cover maintenance of those facilities, which are the Phoenix Art Museum, Children's Museum of Phoenix, Phoenix Theater, Valley Youth Theater, and the new buildings, Ballet Arizona, Ballet Theater Troupe, and Arizona Opera. And this change was in large part through the core process, and our budget has been increased by over 150%. So as was the case last year, expenses in July are high because this is a month that we distribute funds to organizations. So a lot of the $580,000 from the grants program comes out in July. Additional expenses in July are for facilities costs related to those cultural organizations. Approximately in August, the difference there, the 60%, you're starting to see the difference that the facilities cost makes to our budget, about $130,000 difference are totally related to the facilities cost. So we're going to continue to see this as the year goes along. The top 10 expenditures at this point in our budget are somewhat similar to last year, grants and subsidies being the largest amount right now, though considerably different from August, as you'll see. And then in addition to personnel costs, the other expenses you see there, again, relate to the facilities, electricity, so utilities costs, as well as facilities management costs.
So going back to the grants, what's the difference there from 13 to 41?
It's about the percentage of our overall budget. That's what this is showing you. So whereas last year, when we had a budget of $1.5 million, 41% of our budget at this time of the year was from the grants program. Whereas this year, with a $3.9 million budget, it's a smaller percentage of the overall budget.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing exceptional, but I also just wanted to point out for us, the grant, we consider the revenues that we collect in our grant. So this is how we characterize it. So I just wanted you to see some interesting changes that we were able to apply for in a higher category for the Arizona Commission on the Arts grant. We applied it at a level 6 as opposed to level 5, and so we were able to bring in $35,000 this year as opposed to 22. And that's kind of a great accomplishment on understanding that the Arizona Commission on the Arts budget, their grant budget, was slashed in half. So we feel grateful that we were able to receive that amount of money from the ACA. And this was the first time, I think, in many years that we received an NEA grant for in the artworks category for local arts agencies. We cannot qualify for 2 NEA grants. One is in the artworks category for local arts agencies, as I just said, and we're using that money this year for our Arts Build program, which we presented to you in the past. And the other is through Our Town, which is a grant that normally involves a city, a municipal government, as well as other partners. So in this case, Story Days is our project that we are starting to roll out with ASU, Friendly House, and some other partners. And it's $100,000 total, split over 2 years. Any questions?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, so this is Mo Gallegos. I'm the Director of the Human Services Department. Our budget starts this year with $61.75 million, about $630,000 less than last year. We made changes throughout the year to reduce our expenditures, and that's where we're starting this year. This is, of course, the funds that we use for our education birth to 5 programs, our family service centers, our senior centers, family advocacy center, homeless programs, and all the support that swirls around all of those programs. As far as our monthly expenditures, the variance that you see here in July and in August are as a result primarily of our Head Start delegate agencies, payment requests coming in sooner than compared to last year, which is a good thing. And you'll see that trickling effect in other areas as I walk through this. In August, we also had that same thing that happened, as well as our emergency assistance clients that we fund. We were able to make those payments sooner in this year.
So Mo, you talked about the funding coming in early, so probably September, October, you'll see the adjustment on that, or?
Yes, throughout the year. If they're putting in their invoices earlier, as an example, throughout the year it'll even out. Depending on how it goes throughout the year. So this is a good thing.
What month is the norm to actually receive that?
Again, Councilman?
You said that July and August, we ended up getting extra, or they allocated the money earlier. When is the norm for the allocation?
Yeah, what this is these are delegate agencies expending funds and invoicing us earlier. Mm-hmm. And so we're able to then reimburse them earlier. So these are expenditures that we make to them. That means that they're getting their invoices in earlier to us. And this is something that is a good thing really for them as agencies, and certainly for us. You'll see when we talk about revenues that we're able to draw down the federal grant sooner as a result of that.
So at the end of the day, it'll be zeroed out, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilman.
Thank you.
As far as our top 10 expenditures, the top 10, the largest being special contractual, and there is a difference there from last August to the current percentage, and this is also attributed to the Head Start payments. We also moved the Head Start and the homeless. We had funds that were in the consultant line. We moved them to special contractual at the recommendation of Budget and Research to be more in line with the city consistency. So those are the two combinations that you see, the reasons why special contractual looks so much higher than it did at this point last year. We didn't have any other particular anomalies in expenditures. As far as revenues collected in the grants, this is what I was referring to, Councilman Nowakowski. In the grants, you'll see that we have a higher drawdown, and that's as a result of the invoicing faster by the delegate agencies. You also notice that in rentals, we had an increase, and this is as a result of our family advocacy building. We do have some tenants in there, and last year those were not posted. That income was not posted until September. This year it was posted earlier, and then we see the change there. And that was it. If you have any questions.
Good morning. For the library's budget this year, $35.7 million, which is equal to last year. And this funds the staffing and operation of 17 locations throughout the city of Phoenix. Monthly expenditures, you do see some variance here between this year and last year. Basically, the variances are due to different timing and payments for library materials and also custodial services. But you can see as after you average those two together, we're just slightly under last year after 2 months. On expenditures, you can see that they are roughly the same, although same categories, but because the August this year salaries were much higher as were up over last year's, the percentage, it creates that situation where the percentage is much larger. No other expenditures. And then on revenues, we have donations and the grants roughly the same. Library room rentals look lower this month, but in actuality, we collected about the same amount of money. We collected $5,951, but journal entry posting, it just hadn't made it to the books yet. So roughly the same there. Copier fees up a little bit. Library fees and fines, what we're seeing here is a variance because of the huge increase in electronic circulation of materials, which does not carry fees and has automatic renewal. So big increases in our ebook usage. It's up 14% over last year. So it's a much larger segment of our circulation, and we're seeing a decrease in fees because of that. Questions?
Madam Chair, my question is, how are you going to make up the revenue and the collections that you haven't? Are you going to, you have cost savings in the prior slide, or what's your future plans to come out zero budget this year?
Yes, it would be a combination of higher fees for copier and room rentals, and then offsetting with reductions in spending.
And we'll probably see that by when? So we can kind of help you keep online on those benchmarks.
I would say that you would see us under budget currently in our spending. So we will probably maintain that throughout the entire year.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, the Parks and Recreation budget is about the same as it was last year, about $105 million. So it's been steady from year to year. Monthly expenditures, the real difference here is vacancies. We're still holding quite a few vacancies because we're transitioning the landscape to the streets department. And so that's still the vacancies that we're holding. We have not transferred that funding source to the streets department. So you'll see that be pretty big until we get that resolved as well. The top 10 are listed. They're pretty consistent from month to month again. Water, we're a little bit higher this month, but overall the 2 months were $50,000 under where we were last time at this point. But August we were doing some overseeding, and so that's again why there's a little bit more water in August. Electricity, that's different, and partly because of some delays in payments. Again, that'll level itself out, but there's some delay. This was a timing issue with that particular situation. Landscape maintenance, Maryvale Golf Course, since we no longer are managing Maryvale Golf Course, that's been reduced a little bit. Equipment management, that's a little bit higher also, but we had some unexpected repairs to equipment, so that's why that's a little bit higher. No unusual expenditures that we need to note today. And then the very last slide, excuse me. General revenue, you see that's slightly down. Live Nation has a contract with us for the pavilion, and their rent was substantially reduced in year 26. We're in year 26. And so they have 34 more years to go. And so you're going to see that be a little bit lower for coming months as well. Golf special revenue, it's a little bit higher because we're renting more carts, and we're making some more revenue there. Recreation fees, there's a timing issue there from last year to this year. The grants, Fit Phoenix was lucky enough to receive a grant, so that's why that's a little bit different. And we had some timing issues last year as well. The 3PI interest is a little bit higher, slightly, because we had a little bit more of a balance, plus interest rates have gone up and down, and so that changes there. Monopole, we have one more monopole today, so that's why that revenue is a little higher. The tennis center, we have a higher rent to the tennis center now, and so that's why that's slightly higher, but there's also a timing issue with that one, too. Last year, we only had 1 month, now we have 2 months in there. And then the Trust for Heritage Square, that's the same issue, 1 month versus 2 months. So it's just a timing issue. And that concludes if there's any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you so much. Oh,
Greta?
Come up to the mic.
I think she's not done.
Yes, child help.
Are they paying rent?
They are paying costs, yes.
What do you mean?
They're paying utilities, those kinds of costs.
They're paying no rent? They're paying no rent to be in that building?
No, we're.
I find this totally objectionable. We aren't in a position to be giving away financially. The two ladies who titular heads of this organization make $500,000 a year. If they can pay themselves $500,000 a year out of the funds that people contribute to Childhood Help USA, Child Help should and must pay rent at that building. We have not been in a position to give away. And I want this changed.
I'll just ask to be put on a future agenda. So
Aspersion upon the work they do. This is a matter of principle.
the explanation of the whole.
And I'll fill out a card.
Thank you.
Who owns this?
I think everybody's done now.
Thank you.
Speaker comment, Jerry Van Gass.
Jerry Van Gass, Councilwoman Pastor, committee members. It's been 3 months. Good news. We've hired more rangers. They're out there. Trail counters are in, out in the mountain trails, and process has begun on management plans. It's appropriate that we're here in this room. 8 years ago, this subcommittee was meeting to draft and send out Proposition A for a vote of the public. There was talk at that time of making it a permanent tax, but the committee decided they wanted to be accountable to the taxpayers and the voters. So it went out, 85% of the people voted for it. The committee that sent it out, and our mayor was chairman of that subcommittee at the time, they knew what they were sending out there. They knew the language of Prop A. The voters knew the language of it. Consequently, they voted for an extension of 30 years. We've got 25 years to go on that. Roughly $30 million a year coming in. In spite of the moving forward we've had with rangers, et cetera, there's two big glaring omissions that are not being adhered to that are on that proposition. One is an annual audit, public audit. There's no guarantee that's being done. And the other is that it says an oversight committee. It's an oversight committee in name only. That's been addressed. When you're not showing what the audit is, when there's no audit to show them, they can't do their job. Consequently, we would like your support in moving this, because we're at an impasse here. We'd like to move this to the council policy meeting and have it on the agenda. Thank you.
Tim Sirakowski.
Good morning, Tim Sirakowski. I want to continue where Jerry left off because I'm a little concerned about the 3PI fund. And the more I delve into this, the more that this money is being used pretty much as a slush fund. Time for this to end, because every time I open up stuff that is even presented by the city attorney's office, and what they say is, this is the last types of information. This is everything you guys have asked for. The problem is we go to a meeting and they give us more documentation that is not in this book that you guys from your legal department presented. And I'm a little concerned that with, the roundabout at Echo Canyon, the $500,000 or $450 million to a private fund or gift fund that we've never seen before should have been presented to us in this book, and it wasn't. I have another problem because, geez, you guys took another $1.8 million to pay a debt for Papago Golf Course that consequently was a money transfer. See, because money transfers they're not showing up. How come money transfers aren't being shown anywhere? I now have a problem with that because you took another $1.8 million. All our facilities are shuttered, and you keep taking money, and you think it's okay. 3PI money is not to be used for debt. You can't use it for debt. If you think the people of the city of Phoenix is going to give you money to pay debt because of the inability to manage something, they're not. So I'm now concerned with what's really being done with 3PI money. We need to look and readdress 3PI money, and we need to get an oversight committee that's an oversight committee and not something that's just afterthought, because that's all 3PI money is a slush fund. Let's get technical. You're using it for what you want to use. And by the way, it really is running the park system at the present time. You guys aren't, the budget's not contributing money to running running the park system or doing any renovation. 3PI is. And that's not the way this fund was set up to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And Greta.
In the middle.
I didn't push hard enough. My muscles are weak. I want to reiterate and concur with what Jerry and Tim presented. This is a serious problem. This is a legal problem. Misuse of money, authorized by the citizens through a citizens' initiative, not by the council and the mayor. And your obligation is to honor the legality and the intent of that initiative. Acquisition of parkland and preserves, operation of parkland and preserves, and maintenance of parkland and preserves. And operation and maintenance cannot be conflated to paying debt because you've lost money in some division of the Parks Department. Golf courses are ongoing losers. And until you people face the fact that you can't afford to keep all that you have that's an ongoing loser, you'll have this continuing problem. But you don't steal from PI for the maloperation of golf courses or any other thing. Part of my income, personal income, is from a trust fund. And that is very strictly written. And I can't call up the trustee and say, you know what, I've hit a little bit of a rough spot, and I need you to front me $100K. They'd laugh so loud that my eardrums would burst. You are in the same position. This is a trust fund. And the trustees are the citizens. The trustors are the citizens. You're the trustee. And trust is integrity and honor, nothing else. So get your group together and say, enough, we're not going to do it anymore, and you're going to repay the 1.8 you stole again. You don't do it, I'll see you in court and you'll lose again.
Thank you. I skipped over item 12, future agenda items. I believe Child's Help, and once again, 3PI. Anything else?
That's it.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.